Ahoy everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Nazir North and today we're continuing the fantasy map making series, specifically looking at that warm southern continent in the bottom half of the map that I've named Bayatiqa. So let's get started. Now first off, because at the moment it just looks a bit like a sort of fishtail, we're going to flesh out the continent shape and finesse the coastline all the way along until we start to work on the interior. Got to go for that compulsory desert oasis there at the bottom. And just like we've done with the other areas, I'm going to go in with the mountains and the hills first, before we go on to rivers and then trees, and finally colouring. Now the entire bottom half of this region I see to be open desert, so what I'm going to do is just use that hill asset, put it in but leave it uncoloured, so leave it on a sort of yellowy beige sandy colour to look like sand dunes rather than the hills I'm using for the mountain ranges. In terms of civilization for this region, I envisage most of the major settlements to be on the northern coast, where they've got those clear trading routes there to other ports on the main part, on the sort of main continent to the north. Whereas to the south, where conditions are going to be more difficult, it's going to be dry, hot, arid, you'll have much smaller settlements or perhaps even nomadic tribes that roam the deserts. And putting down just a sandy coat for later on. What I am starting to notice, particularly as we progress into these southern areas where there are a lot of assets placed, PC is starting to struggle a little bit, but mainly when I'm using the colouring tool. So what I've done there is just layer that base colour down, so when we come back to finesse the colours later on, hopefully there's not quite so much strain on my system. But of course, it's not all going to be barren wastes. You are still going to have these streams and rivers coming down from the mountains, and some fair areas of greenery. And in contrast to what we've got just across that showed ocean there, that land of Kuladesh, which we looked at last video, that is a dense tropical rainforest. So we are going to have some comparable areas to that in Bayatiqa as well. Here on the western portion of the land, near the coast with a few rivers coming down from the hills, it's that savannah style environment you can imagine. you know, herds of grazing animals roaming the plains, lions or other similar animals as well. Quite a wild area. Pop a little bit of vegetation near this oasis as well. Making it more dense close to the water and then thinning out a little bit as we get further away. You could almost imagine here some kind of migrating herd animal moving from season to season from those sort of savanna plains in the west over to this oasis in the east, making that difficult journey across the desert. Next we're going to add in the rivers for the northern half of the region, and this is usually actually the part that I enjoy the most, getting the water in. There's something particularly satisfying about zooming out and seeing those... It almost looks like a system of tree roots, the rivers, once you've completed a system. decided, rather than another river valley, just to cut that top portion of the region off completely, essentially having a natural canal running through. As I was working on this region as well, I did start to think, it doesn't make sense just all being one nation, Bayatiqa. There are a number of natural boundaries here created by the geography as I'm fleshing it out. I think what I will do, I will revisit this later on and probably split this up into a handful of nations, with Bayatiqa probably just being that northernmost section on the coast where most of the major cities are. And we'll have a few other smaller nations to the south. In fact, this peninsular area I'm working on at the moment could be an entire nation in and of itself, because of its natural sort of geographical isolation from the rest of the land. If you see me often switch into the selector tool to move an individual tree out of the way when I'm placing trees like this, it's because sometimes in Wonderdraft, and again this could be user error, this might not be an issue with the software, it'll place two trees directly on top of one another, and then when you start placing other trees down, they sort of have a little bit of a graphical glitch where it flickers in and out. So I usually just move back in with the tool and move that duplicate tree out of the way. Doesn't happen too often, but now and then. using the brush to fill in this area. This part of the region in particular, because it's so close to Kuladesh, I feel like it needs to have some of that tropical rainforest sort of feel to it. So a good dense forest on the west coastline. I'm not incredibly happy with the shape of the river. In some parts there the curves seem a bit too tight, so what I'm doing is just using some trees to essentially hide my mistakes, placing them close to the river bends so they don't look quite as sharp. Finally, we move on to the colouring. Again, starting with the mountains with the grey and then brown for the hills. As I mentioned earlier, the hills that I've placed in the desert region, I'm going to leave those as that default sandy colour, which I've covered the whole area with, so they look, again, like sand dunes, not like tall hills. I am popping in little bits of white here and there as well in the bigger mountain ranges, so we've got some snowy looking peaks. This is where you won't notice it on the video because of the time lapse, but the computer is struggling a little bit here with the painting. Just because this map is so big, it's not often that I will do a map quite on this scale. Now, to match its neighbour across the ocean, I'm using that new green that I created in the last video to match that in some of the foresty and valley areas of Bayatiqa as well. Again, mainly focusing that green near where the water is. So coastlines and rivers. I do spot, even though we're focusing on Bayatiqa today, I do spot that I never coloured my mountains in the Conflagration Islands, so I'm just going to do that quickly now. And there we have it, another region completed, Bayatiqa all done. We are nearly there. There's the centre of the continent left, and then I need to work out what I want to do with the far shores, that sort of America's-inspired land way across the ocean to the west. And then after that, we are pretty much done. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, and also consider subscribing to the channel so you can stay up to date with this series. We've only got a handful of videos left, so I really do hope you stay until the end. Cheers, guys.